Hey, Julie, it is great to see you again. Welcome to the show.
It's so good to see you.
Yeah,
Yay!
I'm so happy to have you here. So, for listeners and viewers who don't know, I actually knew about you before I'd met you because Forget Me Not, your debut novel, was all over TikTok or BookTok last summer. So, I definitely want to chat about social media's role in book publishing these days. But first, I would love if you could share the background of how you became an author. Because I think it's really easy for people to see a best-selling debut novel and think that you were an overnight success. But the truth is that you actually worked really hard for years, right? Before Forget Me Not was published.
Yeah, so I was in theater my entire life. Studied theater in college, started writing a musical, and was really focused on either acting, performing, or playwriting in my 20s, which was yesterday, of course. And they basically we were working on this musical, and it took about like 10 years of my life um, to continue putting it on and refining it and editing and finding producers. And we did really well at the 2017 New York Musical Festival, which is now since closed, which is sad. But and then with COVID, it just kind of, all theater stopped, particularly theater that was not a sure thing. Um, so I kind of had the pandemic to look at how to shift what it was that I wanted to do with my life. And at the same time, back in 2016, 2017, I started writing fan fiction. And I'd kind of amassed a little bit of a following there. Have, some really loyal readers who have followed me over to publishing, but I had experience with writing things for consumption in a way. And, writing to what people want to see with a balance of what you want to see. So I was basically writing fan fiction for such a long time and kind of translated both the playwriting and the fan fiction writing into writing rom-coms and writing for traditional publishing.
So I think that's actually so fascinating. I've never heard anyone describe their fan fiction experience as that learning that ability to write for consumption like immediately. And I think that that is part of the reason that Forget Me Not was such a huge success from the beginning because it is so addictive. Like you start reading it and you just don't want to stop. You love the characters. I wonder if this is part of the reason why the book became such a runaway hit on social media. But at the same time, so many people write great books and they don't make it big on TikTok or Instagram. So did you know that this was going to happen? Did you have a feeling before your book came out? And was it anything that you or your publisher did, in particular to get this in front of influencers' eyes? Because I think a lot of people will be very curious how this works.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even think of it as an overnight hit. It's very kind of you, but I think it did really well. But I would say I didn't think that it would be a hit with book talk because you don't really know what book talk is going to do for your book when you're a debut. But I would say the things that my publisher and I talked about doing was kind of specifically making sure that my fan fiction fans, the original fans, were felt appreciated in a way. There were special giveaways directed, galley and arc giveaways directed only to people in certain Facebook groups that were fans of my fan fiction. There was a lot of, trying to cross-pollinate and trying to make sure that people knew that Loves Bitka 8 is now publishing as Julie Soto and, come follow her over on this account. Um, so I think that's the only thing that we really we really tried for in terms of kind of harnessing that existing fandom in a way.
And how is fan fiction, that fandom world, different from what you've seen now in, I don't know, I'll just call it the regular publishing world for lack of a better term?
Yeah, the readers, you mean, or like just the whole the whole shebang?
I guess let's start with readers, but I feel like there's so
Yeah,
many interesting things here to unpack.
yeah. The I think the readers, well, the interesting thing about fan fiction readers is that they're reading fan fiction not just because it's free, but because it's giving them something that traditionally published books are not. There's even a lot of fan fiction fans of mine who have specifically stated that but I don't like books. I wish you were still writing fan fiction. And I'm like, I'd like money. No, I'm joking. You know, so it's definitely like they can't even muster up like the fake enthusiasm for me in my career. It's like, but are you gonna still write fanfic? Because like I only want to read about Draco and Hermione. And I'm like, totally, my friends. Like I get that. And there's millions of stories online for you by wonderful authors. So I think there's a sense of fan fiction has a sense of kind of like I used to say by women for women, which is kind of the same thing that people say about romance sometimes, but I also think it kind of just more so nowadays it's by generally not cis het white men for not cis het white men. It's not what's traditionally on TV and in bookstores. It's a smaller community of people who are glad to have found each other. And I think that is the exact same thing as romance in terms of recommending things, not just because they're good and they made you feel something, but because it's spicy, and giving women giving other women, porn recommendations. Hey, is almost, the funny way of phrasing it.
So when you started working on this book and you were ready, you finished it, did you go through the traditional methods of querying agents and then finding a publisher, or were you discovered in the fan fiction world by an agent who was scouting for new talent?
Yeah, so I basically I did query, but I queried a completely separate book, which is now Not Another Love Song, which comes out this summer. So my second book was written first. And so I had Not Another Love Song was a fan fiction of mine that I took down and did a lot of heavy work to over the course of a year or two. And I started querying with it to find an agent. And took a long time to land with my agent, but she actually was someone who was very comfortable with fan fiction and knew, she had read my fanfics. She knew who I was and was excited to work together. So she, it was great to have that kind of understanding with someone. But and then she went on maternity leave, and I had like 6 months of kind of like wondering what I should do with myself now that I had an agent, and I started writing Forget Me Not. So when my agent came back from maternity leave, she had two manuscripts to kind of juggle with which one should go out first. And ultimately, we decided that more people had been to a wedding than had performed in an orchestra.
That makes sense. So I like that there was strategy involved, and that in terms of deciding which book to debut, launch your name out there as an author of novels and not fan fiction. But
Yeah.
also, I think that it's so interesting that you had the patience to wait on
Hmm.
another love song and work on it,
Yeah.
presumably, right, while she was on maternity leave.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of Not Another Love Song was written back in like 2018, I think. Actually, might even been 2019. And that was when it was posted online. And then I started editing it in 2020, and kind of it's just been evolving the whole time. So Forget Me Not was very much written as a romance novel, not as a fanfic. I, you know, I started writing it as a fanfic. I got like half a chapter in and I said, this, I'm about to do a lot of research on flowers. It's like this would be very well received in the fanfic community, but if there was any story that could translate into a traditionally published novel, I think this one works really well. So I held off and waited to write it as a book.
Are you allowed to share which fanfic Not Another Love Song is from, or is that something you kind of want to
Yeah.
leave as a mystery?
No, it was a Reylo fanfic, which is Rey and Kylo Ren from the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And it was called The Food of Love, and which is a Shakespeare quote, but a lot of people in the fanfic community were like, this isn't about food at all. I'm like, I know, here. Yeah, so it was up on AO3 for several years, and it's been taken down now, but a lot of people are really excited. I'm glad that the people who read it when it was up are recognizing it and are very excited to read it this summer.
And how does that work when your work, or at least an earlier version of it, is already online and then later you take it down to become a book? Because I know that this has happened with a lot of authors, actually. So one of the most famous ones being 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fan fiction.
Hmm.
And then that later became a book that was picked up by traditional publishers and obviously a huge bestseller. Are there limitations, copyright issues, or anything like that that you have to deal with? Or is it just as long as you transform the work enough, it's okay and can be published again or for the first time as this new separate work of art?
Yeah, it really, the fan fiction itself cannot be copyrighted, because the characters don't belong to you. So you're already creating most of the time. Sometimes, you watch a TV show and you're like, I wish we had more to that one scene, or like they just started kissing and they faded to black. I'm gonna write the sex scene, so you're taking like the dialogue from the show and then you're like expanding the scene out. So like that's a specific thing in itself where you're not making profit off of it, so it's a legal gray area. You don't have to like, you know you're not playing with copywritten material for money. So but then a lot of times fan fiction is about completely creating a brand new set of circumstances and just utilizing those characters that you love. So to my knowledge, at least, my very basic understanding of it is like you're a lot of people who take their fanfic down and uh, edit it into an original novel. It's a lot more than filing off the serial numbers and just doing Control F, find and replace names, because you have to reintroduce these characters to readers, who to make it way more uh, universal and not as specific as it was in the fic. I always say that if you're going to adapt one of your fanfics, just plan on adding 4 chapters to the top. Like it'll always be 4 or 5 extra chapters in the first half, less than half in the first quarter, there's going to be four more chapters than than there were. And that's just a necessity, and it doesn't mean that it's all before the book starts. Like you could still have like the same, my fanfic, the very first scene in The Food of Love is still the very first scene in Not Another Love Song. But then between chapter 1 and you know, chapter 4 of the fanfic, I've added. So like chapter 4 in the fanfic is now chapter 10 in the book. So it's like there will always be that extension and that kind of like, let's get to know these people and what they want and who they surround themselves with.
Okay, that is really, really fascinating to me. And it makes so much
Yeah.
sense. I think also it's interesting because in all of my books, which are not based on, any characters that exist before, I still end up rewriting the early chapters. So very often in
Yeah.
my zero draft, first draft, even second draft, whatever is the first chapter later becomes chapter 2 or chapter 3 or completely thrown away. Does that happen? Did that happen
Yeah.
to you with Forget Me Not?
Not with these. I kept with both of these books, my chapter ones did take a lot of beating, in terms of like the editors. I feel like also editors, they don't get lazy at the end, but they themselves are trying to figure out why they're not forgetting that they're in the middle of an edit. Like they go in, I'm starting to edit this book, and then they just hit chapter 1 so hard, but by the time they reach maybe like chapter 16, they're like, great chapter, and then they move on, and it's like they're like everyone's in their swing, the writer and the reader. So chapter 1 is always very meticulously edited, I find, but I have not yet deleted and rewritten. I have added and chopped up more so.
Okay, so I want to shift back to what we started with talking about TikTok and Instagram, because I've been thinking a lot about direct author to audience connections. And it used to be that writers could sit back and let their publishers just do all the publicity work. But nowadays, I think a lot of readers crave a closer connection to the author, which you know so much about because you came from the fan fiction world and that fandom. So now, as a traditionally published author as well,
Yeah.
your Instagram, for example, is excellent. How do you cultivate a community of excited readers on social media and just keep them engaged, not only in that first week when your book comes out, but, for the rest of the year, even?
Yeah. I think, and I think there's leaps and bounds that I could go to be better at it. But it's a balance, and it's a balance that I learned from fan fiction of you have to let the readers into your life, but not into your mental health. And that's kind of, in fan fiction, I learned pretty quickly that I set up pretty clear boundaries with a lot of readers a lot of the time, because there's a lot of DMing, there's a lot of, you know, um, friend requesting and getting to know people and talk, like I have a fanfic I'm working on too. Do you have any advice for me? And I'm like, no, because I haven't read you, like I'll give you general advice, but and then they'll say, would you read my fanfic? And I'll say, maybe I can't volunteer to be your beta reader or editor, which is generally what a lot of fanfic friends do for each other. Um, but it's, finding the author community and fostering the friends that you make there. And so it's very similar to the romance community in a lot of ways, because there's so much connection and so much conversation, but at the same time, you authors get seen as less of a human and more of a public figure in traditional publishing. And not to say that we're celebrities, because that's just incorrect, but there are like five of us who are celebrities. And they're the ones who, actually need to travel with security. So it's hard. I feel like I'm more comfortable talking about like how I put up boundaries than I am about how I foster a community with my readers on Instagram. But I think it's just giving a little bit of your life, but also keeping it focused on your career and your books. And there's a lot of people with really excellent social media skills that don't even show their faces, and so there's a certain boundary there as well. I think for me, I go to a lot of bookstore openings. I go to a lot of conferences and conventions and festivals. So a lot of people have gotten FaceTime with me across the states, across the US. So there's it helps to meet someone in person a lot of the time. But I don't even know what to say about how to engage your readers, and because I feel like there's people who post every day or like create a lot of content for their books, and I think it works really well. But one thing that I learned from someone who had been a true overnight sensation and learned a lot of quick lessons. She told me, like, remember that, like, BookTok, you have a BookTok account to be tagged, not necessarily to make the reels that are like, here's what to find in this book, and like it's like sometimes it's fun to make that image of like your book and then the little squiggly lines that are like enemies to lovers and like the little like trope graph of what's in your book. Like you can make that yourself, but also like the readers are going to do that. So like you can just allow yourself to be tagged and then share what the readers are saying. And then it comes from a place of authenticity, I think.
I think that
Those are
makes
like the little lessons I've learned. Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of times the readers online, they don't necessarily want you as the author to be selling the book to them. They want to be the
Yeah.
ones creating, like you said, the cute graphics. But then you also have to balance that there are people discovering you for the first time who don't know what your book is about, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes I think it's personal content, sometimes it's book content. So you don't mind being at conventions, meeting people in person, being on videos. Do you think that it is required these days as an author, any kind of creative,
Mm.
to be online? Because I think it's hard. Like we were saying before, it's a new publishers only have so many resources, and it seems like it's a requirement even to just get started, to have a platform already and then to continue making that platform.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it doesn't, you can still be extremely successful, like I said, not showing your face or not having social media. I think it's can be genre dependent in a way, because the young adult and romance readers are on BookTok and Bookstagram. So someone needs to be there showing the cover of your book to the algorithm. And in those genres, that's my opinion. Someone needs to be doing it. If your publisher is going to do it for you and make you a lead title and do all the work, that's great. But generally, they're going to be like, make an account so you can be tagged, post one picture of your book, pin it to the top of your profile, and you're done. I think it's necessary in this day and age for particularly those two genres. But of course, there's like, Stephen King doesn't need an Instagram. Does he have one? I don't know. Like I don't need to follow him on Instagram to know what he's up to. So, so I think it depends. If you are just starting out, I think it is required. But that is also depending on what kind of success you want. If you want the readership, and if you want if you want overnight success, and you want, to be listing on the bestseller lists, then I think you need to be someone needs to be showing your book cover to the algorithm.
Okay, so you were talking about people who are just starting out, and I was wondering, since you are a creative person in multiple art forms, you are a playwright, you're a novelist, you've written fan fiction. What is one piece of advice you would give to somebody who is just beginning their career as a writer?
I would say this one's overused, but it's just such a good one. And you have to read inside and outside of your genre. Um, there's, it was hard for me because I was entering the romance space, and I was not someone who picked up, found bodice rippers on her aunt's bookshelf. Like, I was not someone who was reading Lisa Kleypas, like, 15 years ago, or however long. Oh God, maybe only 10. Like, I was not someone who was reading chick lit and the early days of romance. So, like, I had to take, instead I was reading fan fiction. Like, I was immersing myself in fan fiction, and then eventually I wrote fan fiction, and it did well because I understood what worked. So the transition, if you want to write whatever it is that you want to write, you have to be familiar with what's going on in that genre right now, and also a little bit of where that genre was 5 years ago. Um, so I really, it's such a simple piece of advice, and you'd think that it's silly almost, but you have to read inside your genre and outside of your genre. You have to read, I love reading mysteries and thrillers, and I love reading fantasy and speculative fiction and literary fiction, and just seeing what works, and what hits bestseller lists, and why, is kind of what you need to start doing, critically thinking about what you're reading.
And you mentioned understanding the genre for the last 5 years or so. I've never heard that advice before. Why do
hmm
you recommend looking back?
I think specifically in romance, 5 years ago, you have to discount the pandemic entirely. But back in 2016, we had the Me Too movement. And there was a huge shift in consent in romance, and also shifting away from Christian Grey, the alpha male who's silent and and will have these outbursts of rage if he's pressed about his emotions. Not Christian Grey in general, but the alpha male, the billionaire, the toxic masculinity that was so attractive to us just 10 years ago has completely shifted. And we've, as women, as readers, as consumers of book boyfriends, I should say, not just as women, but as consumers of book boyfriends, we have we have tried to internalize, or examine our internalized misogyny, and what is attractive to us. And now we have cinnamon rolls and soft boys, and we have Allie Hazelwood heroes who have been pining for the entire book. And we have these things that are just so delicious and just universally very liked by readers. And there is nothing wrong with, but the book I've been working on for 10 years that I'm just getting ready to query has a billionaire alpha male as the love interest. It's like, great, he better ask for consent in the bedroom. It's like great, there's still a place for that. Just know where we were and where we are, and either accept the fact that a lot of readers are going to need a content warning now at the beginning of your book, or that you have to you have to explain where he's coming from in ways that we didn't have to explain Christian Grey.
I think it's
Yeah,
incredibly smart of you to recommend that people look back into the past for 5 years and see kind of where the genre is going, any genre, whatever genre they're writing in. Do you ever try to look
yeah.
forward? Do you ever try to guess what the next trends are or where we're headed?
I I mean, like, I'm not ever guessing, but I'm hoping. It's like you're writing something that doesn't quite fit with the trend right now, but you're like, but maybe in 5 years, well, not even five, like maybe in 3 years when it's eventually out, because you kind of are writing like 3 years in advance a lot of the time. When it's out, hopefully either this new trend won't be over, or like this old trend that's getting so saturated is going to drop off. That's kind of that's interesting, is the first time you hear a reader say, I'm getting a little sick of hearing the term romantasy. And you're like, I heard it for the first time 8 months ago. What are you talking about? you know, like you're like, I mean, yeah, a trend can come and go quick, but like people are writing romantasy right now because it became a trend 8 months ago with Fourth Wing, and not even with Fourth Wing, because like I'd argue that Akatar is, but that was that was called New Adult. And so that, it's all about where the indie bookstore puts you on the shelf. Are you on the romantasy shelf? Are you on the new adult shelf? Are you on the spicy BookTok recommendation shelf? And then more broadly at Barnes and Noble, where they don't have any of those specific shelves, are you in fantasy, or are you in romance? Are you an adult? Are you in young adult? And just trying to figure out where a reader would physically pick you up in a brick and mortar bookstore.
Okay, lightning round. You ready for this? One sentence or less.
Let's do it. I will make the best run-on sentences you have ever heard.
All right. So this first one is a layup, and since your next book is not another love song, do you listen to music while you're writing?
Yes, but I generally do no lyrics. So either spa music, or I am obsessed with Lee Bardugo, so I listen to what she listens to, which is Ludovico Einaudi, an Italian composer.
Love it. Okay. Do you believe in writer's block?
I do, but I don't think it's a stop. I don't think it's a stop. Like I think there are more ways to fix it than we talk about. How's that?
That's great. I think we're going to have to do an entire episode another time just about how to break
Yeah,
writer's block. That was a really
yeah.
unfair lightning round question. Okay. Salty or sweet snacks?
I always prefer sweet over salty, but when it's actually like a snack, like something that I'm having between meals, then it's salty.
A book you've recently read that made you think?
Abby Jimenez's Just for the Summer made me made me cry, made me laugh, made me think. It gave me all the things.
I'm adding it to my TBR immediately. Okay. And
Yeah.
do you have any lightning round questions for me?
If you had to write fan fiction about any couple in TV, film, or book universes, what couple would you say, I could write more to this story, or I could fix this story?
I feel like it's very presumptuous to say that I could fix a story because I have so much respect for the storyteller that I feel like they did a
Yeah.
great job.
Generally, it's TV that we're always like, I could fix that. They messed up big time.
Okay, that's a great tip. This is a very long lightning round answer, but How I Met Your Mother, I really hated how it
Yes.
ended. And so I would
Yes.
rewrite that whole last season.
Yeah. No spoilers. I'll try my hardest, but I just saw an interview and I don't even get the algorithm does not show me How I Met Your Mother stuff. So I'm not quite sure why this just happened. And then you just brought this up. Uh, there was an interview from the five cast members, like right before maybe not before the finale, but like sometime in the last season. And they were saying, do you think fans will be excited? Do you think da 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 da? And someone was just doing that thing where they zoom in on every cast member and they're like existential dread, like, and it's like, vigorous head nodding, and it's Allison Hannigan like, like trying to keep her mouth shut, but like, and then someone's over talking. Someone's like, I think it's a lot of wish fulfillment, and I think it's a lot of, I think the watchers are going to be super happy just about, not just about who's with who, but where everyone ends up in life. And like a couple of people are just completely dead silent, and it's just hilarious. It's really fascinating. If I find it again, I'm gonna send it to you because it's like you're just reading into a lot of the actors being like, I'm not sure if anyone's gonna like this,
I love that though,
and they
because
didn't.
it's so interesting though, because the actors, obviously they don't have control over the storyline, but also as viewers,
Yeah,
as readers, we all get so invested in the story and the
yeah,
characters, and everyone has their own opinion. So in a way, some people not being happy is a measure of success for how well you have written this story to get people to care so incredibly much.
invested. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with that.
Okay, well, this was such an amazing conversation. It's always so fun to talk to you. Before we go, tell readers and viewers what you're working on next.
We have Not Another Love Song comes out, I believe today is when this is posting. And I have more books coming in 2025. I have two books coming out. I have a young adult thriller and I have a fantasy romance. And I am almost positive that both of those things will be announced by the time this airs.
So, so excited about that. And where can everyone find you online?
I am at Julie Soto Writes everywhere.
I love that. Your brand consistency is on
I
point.
know.
So don't
Exactly.
forget.
I was just going to say, sorry. That's my website too. So if anyone wants to join my newsletter, the link is there.
Don't forget to pick up Julie's latest novel, Not Another Love Song, which is available everywhere books are sold. Thank you so much for being on the show, Julie.
Thank you, Evelyn. Yay!
Want more writing advice and career insight? Join thousands for free at creativeinspiredhappy.com to go behind the scenes with best-selling authors and get access to our book club for writers, creativity challenges, and more. I can't wait to see you there.